Hey everyone, welcome to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgity. We're here to chat about all things mental health, share some awesome stories, educate, and advocate to break stigmas and gain power through knowledge for all ages and walks of life, and give you the tools you need to boost your mental game. So grab a coffee, get comfy, tune in, get inspired, and let's dive into some fascinating conversations. Remember, your mind is super powerful, and with the right tools and knowledge, you can master your mental playbook. And while you're doing that, take care of you. Hey everyone, Christine here, and welcome back to the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgity. Today's episode is dedicated to a journey that is both isolating and overwhelming. Finding peace as an adult who was raised by a narcissistic parent. If you're from Canada, that's where I get most of my statistics because that's where I live. And if you're feeling this way, you're not alone. Estimates suggest that 1 in 20 Canadians may experience narcissistic personality disorder, either directly or within their families. While NPD is more rare, many more experience the emotional abuse or the emotional fallout of narcissistic parenting. And I say that because the NPD is rare, and these numbers, 1 in 20 Canadians, it's probably more than that. Because here's the thing. People with narcissistic behaviors, narcissists, people who may be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, don't get diagnosed because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They usually think things are wrong with other people, and that's what's making them behave that way. So they don't go to therapy. And if they do, I had mentioned this before in a podcast about narcissism, they come to get help in dealing with all the idiots in their life, all the people that are causing them grief and causing them to behave this way or can't measure up, how they have to work harder because they can do it better than their boss or have to do everything on their own because nobody's as smart as them, that kind of thing. So not that many people, there's probably more people that this affects than what these estimates suggest. So in this episode, I'm going to explore how growing up in an environment with a narcissistic parent, how it can impact adulthood, and share some more statistics, Canadian statistics, and stories that you might recognize in your own life. I will share some client stories because I deal with adults who've experienced narcissistic parenting. Obviously, I will not share anything that is identifying of those clients, but I will share some situations just to help others identify and understand. And most importantly, I'm going to share some strategies on how to work through the ramifications as an adult and understand what happened to you and find some peace, find some inner peace. So grab a cup of tea, grab a coffee, settle in, and let's understand the ramifications of narcissistic parenting and how to move through it together. Let's start by, I think it's really important that we understand what narcissistic parenting is, because sometimes I do hear things like, oh yeah, I had a narcissistic parent. And when they start to explain it, I'm like, no, you had a parent with rules. You had a parent with expectations. So I want to define what narcissistic parenting is. It's not a parent who offhandedly says, after everything I've done for you, why can't you just help me like this? That's not a narcissistic parent. A narcissistic parent says that, but it's in a different context that I'm going to talk about. Let's start by defining narcissistic parenting. Narcissistic parents often see their children as extensions of themselves. So they don't see their children as individuals. They're an extension of them. So everything they do is a reflection of them. So their love and approval are conditional, and it often depends on whether the child is meeting the parent's emotional needs. Narcissistic parents display a pervasive pattern of grandiosity. So their kids have to be in the highest level things and they have to exceed those levels, be very successful just in everything that they have, in the image that others see them, their family. Kids aren't allowed to misbehave. They're not, it's that image, it's that grandiosity, and a need for admiration. It is a pervasive pattern of a need for admiration and a lack of empathy. Their children, narcissistic parents, their children often feel unseen, unheard, and emotionally neglected. Signs might include a parent who demands constant praise. They demand, not just, they seek it from other people. Wow, you are such a good parent. You're such a good mom. You're such a good dad. You do so much. They seek that, but they demand it from their children. They demand constant praise from their children. They manipulate through guilt and shame. That one is huge. The number of clients that come through my office as adults who people please, and I'm going to get into all of that, but just, that guilt and shame that they carry, because that's how they were parented. The parent used guilt or shame to get what they want out of the child, or make them behave or perform, or whatever it may be. Another sign is that parent invalidates feelings or dismisses your feelings. And here's a big one. They pit siblings against one another. So if you were with me in my episode on narcissism, living with a narcissist, you heard about triangulation. And I use the example of a parent. Parents who use triangulation, that's pitting siblings against one another. So they want an ally. And so if you think of the triangle, the points, then what it would be like, the parent would be 1 point. Look at a triangle with 2 points on the bottom and 1 at the top, right? So the parent would be 1 point on the bottom, and they would really praise a child, one of the siblings, or make them feel special. So that sibling would align with the parent, and then so they're on the bottom, and then the top of the triangle would be the child that they're ostracizing at that time, or punishing by removing. So not only do they remove their own affection, they remove sibling affection or sibling connection as well. But then that sibling, that child will do something that isn't, it doesn't make them look good and everything, or they're not compliant. So then they're at the top, and then the child that's at the top is down at the bottom. And it doesn't matter if there's 2 children or 10, they just kind of go around between siblings. Yeah, then it causes loss of connection between siblings. They grow up more distant as well. So it can also look like controlling behavior. So they control every aspect. These are the courses you're going to take, and these are the sports you're going to play. You're going to go into this career because it is like a doctor or a lawyer, because it is perceived as high level and prestigious. The parent controls everything that you do in order to make them look good. They want a doctor child, a child who becomes a doctor, right? They want a child who is a lawyer because that looks really good and prestigious. There's emotional manipulation. That one is huge, and guilt is usually how they do it. But emotional manipulation, where they use your emotions to manipulate you to do what they want. They say things like, yeah, I know, I'm a horrible parent. There's other parents out there that are worse, but I'm a horrible parent. And again, it's not a one-off. That is how they parent. Or fear, right? They will do things that force you to comply out of fear. And then there's also neglect that happens. They're so involved in their life that they neglect your needs. Again, it's more an abusive thing, the neglect, where your needs aren't met, all needs, not just your emotional needs, but all needs, because they're doing their thing, right? Or it's about them. So as a child, you may have felt invisible. You were just pushed aside. Your achievements might have been minimized or claimed, right? So if you had a sibling that was had higher grades or excelled in sports, not all kids in one family have the same strengths. And so if you had a sibling who does that, then anything you achieve, if it's not at that level, would be minimized. So you may have a personal best in something and you're like, wow. And you tell your parent, it's like, yeah, well, Timmy has this and this. You're not there yet, right? So it's minimized or it's claimed. Because you're, as a child, the child of a narcissist is an extension of the parent. If they achieve something, the parent claims it. Oh, it's because, I helped them do that. Or did you see what my kid did? It's not well done. It's all about, it's claimed. It's because of me that happened. Because of, it could be, well, it's because of all the money I put into your hockey that you got that far, right? Or the time that I spent. It's not your achievement. And your failures are magnified. So think about growing up where your achievements are minimized and your failures are magnified, because it makes them look bad. And it could be something like not putting the dishes in the dishwasher properly, right? It's that criticism that, have I not taught you how to put the dishes in the dishwasher? I've told you 100 times, and it's perfection. It's an emotional roller coaster. And not unlike being in an adult relationship with a narcissist, but think of being a child in that relationship. And I'm going to talk about the brain a little bit and how it creates things. I've talked about it before, but I want to just review it a little bit. It leaves these deep, lasting marks. It's being raised by a narcissist is going to determine how you see yourself, others, your world, relationships, attachments, the whole bit. So it leaves a lasting impact, a lasting mark. Adult children with narcissistic parents might experience self-doubt. They do. They experience self-doubt. They struggle with chronic self-doubt. It's not, again, a one-off. It's like every decision they make, they second guess it. They doubt that they're doing the right thing. They doubt their abilities. They doubt their intelligence. They doubt their kindness. It's a chronic self-doubt that can happen. They have difficulty trusting others. I mean, why would they trust others, right? So they have difficulty trusting others, difficulty trusting if they mean what they say, if they're genuine about that. But also I've had clients where raised by narcissistic parents and they get into a healthy relationship, which often takes time and doesn't always happen, I'm going to talk about, but a healthy relationship, and they sabotage it because they don't know what that's like. And they think that person is just making it up. They think that person is trying to manipulate them because they're being kind to them, because they're validating them. And so they often sabotage those relationships. And they also have difficulty setting boundaries. They don't know boundaries because either their boundaries were like walked right over, torn down, or boundaries were so rigid that they have difficulty setting them because they're afraid, because the boundaries weren't their boundaries. They were the parents' boundaries that were so rigid. But usually it's because parents don't care about their children. Narcissistic parents don't care about their children's boundaries. And then they also grow up internalizing the belief that they don't matter, that their needs don't matter. I've said before what this leads to: people pleasing. And as you get older and you get into relationships, if you are a people pleaser and you're over functioning because of the narcissistic parent, you are going to attract narcissistic partners because that's what they seek. Right? They want you to do things for them. They want you to give your own needs. And it just repeats the cycle. But people pleasing is huge. Your own needs are pushed aside because that's how you grew up. And anxiety and depression is pretty much a given as an adult. And the one thing that I want you to remember is that this is not your fault. If you get into a narcissistic relationship as an adult when you were raised by narcissistic parents, it's not your fault. Also, we always have these stereotypical views, right? Like stereotypes of a narcissist. And again, if you tuned into my podcast on narcissism, I spoke about covert and overt narcissism. And the stereotype of the narcissistic parent is like vanity and arrogance, or narcissism is vanity and arrogance. But it's not always that way. It's not. Narcissistic parenting isn't just about that. It's about control. It's about manipulation, and it's about emotional neglect. So it's not just about trying to be, everyone see the fun parent, the amazing parent. That arrogance, it's not just about the vanity, it's that underlying stuff that a lot of other people don't see. Narcissistic parents lack empathy. They, as I said, they demand admiration, and they make their children responsible for their emotional needs. So they don't take ownership, they don't take accountability. Their child is responsible for their moods and their emotional needs being met. So if you've heard phrases like, "You're too sensitive," again, I always clarify this because I know you get comments like, "Well, my parents said that and they weren't narcissistic," or I'm speaking generally, right? If I grew up in an era where it was like, "You're too sensitive, don't be so sensitive," that's not the same. It's when they have hurt you, they have minimized you, they have withdrawn affection, whatever it may be, and then they say, "Oh, don't be so sensitive." They dismiss the feelings that you have, so you shut it down. "After all I've done for you." Again, I mean, I said that to my kid before, but it wasn't a normal, right? And when he was older, and it wasn't like that either. It's more like, "Dude, like after everything I've done, could you just take out the garbage?" Right? That's not the same. Narcissistic parents make you owe them, right? So, which is the classic one. The next one is, "You owe me." So it's like, I raised you. I did all of this for you. After everything I've done for you, you owe me. And most parents don't raise their children in a way that when they grow up, they owe them, or as a 5-year-old, they owe them compliance and obedience. Is there a reciprocal respect as they grow up that a healthy parent raises their child to be independent, an independent, productive member of society, right? And so when your children are thriving and when they get older, that's what you want. It's not, "I want you to see all the things that I did to make you this way, and you need to praise me for that." That's a narcissistic parent. All of these phrases, and there's many more, but these are just some common ones that I hear. All of these phrases, they're not just words, they're weapons. These weapons, these words, I often say some people use words as a sword, right? So these weapons impact how you see yourself. They shape your inner world. So all of these messages that you tell yourself and how you relate to other people. Children who are raised in narcissistic environments often grow up doubting their own reality. They question, "Is this real or am I just making this up?" They suppress their emotions. They do not share their emotions. They suppress their emotions, and they feel chronically unsafe. They don't ever feel safe as adults or children. And it's not always maybe like that physical safety, although some narcissistic parents are physically abusive as well. But it's not that safety. They don't feel safe emotionally. They don't feel safe expressing themselves. They don't feel safe making a mistake or, being a kid and misbehaving from time to time. And as an adult, they're waiting to be in trouble, right? One of my clients said to me, and I'm going to talk about this client a little bit later because it's very sad, but it's also, really talks about what we're talking about here. As, an adult, this client sees a text message from their parent and right away they're like, Did I do something? Am I in trouble? Right? And this is an adult with a family, but that's the thought that comes up. Or did I forget to do something? Or the gaslighting, right? Did I say I would do that and I didn't? What? And their partner's like, no, you never said that. So at least now they have that validation. One Canadian study found that adult children raised by narcissistic parents report significantly higher rates of anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem compared to the general population. Many describe always and still feeling like they were never good enough. Nothing they ever did was good enough, or that their emotions didn't matter when they were growing up. So if that rings true for you, you're not imagining it. Like I said, the gaslighting that happens to the developing brain with a narcissistic parent makes you think you're imagining it or that you're exaggerating. And a 2019 survey by the Canadian Mental Health Association found that 33% of adults said that their mental health struggles could be traced back to their family of origin. And that's just what's reported. So it's much higher than 33%, I would say. And in our Q&A podcast, Lily asked me why we dig back into childhood. And that is why, right? Because yeah, your childhood, that's the past. You can't change it, right? But understanding that and showing, and it's not always, if you had a narcissistic parent, yeah, it is about blaming them and maybe trashing them if that's, how you perceive it. But it's not about doing that. It's about understanding where it's coming from. If 33% of reported adults said that their mental health struggles came from the family of origin, think about the amount that actually is, right? And that's not just narcissistic parents. That could be a number of the messages that you receive. So right now, I encourage you to reflect and think about which patterns of your childhood do you still notice today? And again, I'm talking about narcissistic parenting, so I really want you to reflect on that. But I also want you to reflect on just what patterns from your childhood do you still have today so that you can understand it, because awareness is the first step to change, whether it's narcissism or where did my social anxiety come from? And it doesn't necessarily have to be parents. It's usually an adult, but it could have been bullying. It could have been teachers, grandparents, but just ask yourself what patterns I still have today and try to reflect on that and become aware of that, because that is how we're going to change it. So just some relatable, just to help you relate to it a little bit. Because of the gaslighting, you're probably still sitting there going, yeah, but were they that bad? Yeah, but I did misbehave sometimes, right? I didn't always listen. I could have been a little jerk sometimes too. That's what the gaslighting did. So I'm just going to share some more relatable experiences. So some common patterns, and just ask yourself if they sound familiar. You were praised publicly, but criticized privately. It's all about image. So out there, after a game, a hockey game or something, it was, oh, you got a goal, good job, right? It wouldn't be, did you try? Did you? It would be that grandiosity. So you got a goal, good job. And it's all this praise. And then as soon as you get in the car, you could have had 4 goals. You didn't skate fast enough. You didn't try hard enough. But out there, so that they look like the good parent. So if you were praised publicly, and I use hockey because I always refer to sports, but it could be anything. It could be playing a musical instrument. It could just be the way you behaved, right? Praised publicly so they can maintain the image. And then as soon as you get behind closed doors, you are criticized. Your parent made you feel guilty for having needs or independence. So if you were able to do something on your own, you might have heard, oh, so you don't need me anymore. All right, well, I'll just go over here. Right? There's the guilt. As you get older, right? They don't want you to leave. They'll say, well, why do you have to go to school so far away? Or meanwhile, you're trying to get away, right? If you have needs. So that's the independence part. Like if you have any independence, they make you feel guilty for that, like they're the victim. And it's often sarcasm's used. Oh, so I'm not a good enough parent that you need my help? Or the needs that they make you feel guilty for having needs. I have all this stuff to do. I don't have time to worry about your sadness, right? Or I don't have time to worry about issues you have at 13 with your friends. That kind of thing makes you feel guilty. So then you don't share it anymore. And it can cause a codependency as well. Narcissism can. But even with the independence, you feel like you can't do stuff on your own because it upsets your parents. So you don't do stuff on your own and you become dependent on them. I've had clients give up dreams of going to school and becoming whatever they want to become because they didn't want to upset their narcissistic parent. So they didn't do what they wanted to do. So here's another pattern that might sound familiar. Boundaries were non-existent. Your parents treated your achievements as their own, or your failures as theirs to judge. So there was no boundaries there. So narcissistic people don't like boundaries. So there was no boundaries, but then there was also no boundaries in the fact that they would treat your achievements as their own, and they would, if you did not achieve something, then they were allowed to judge you. They were allowed to criticize you because they're your parent. And do you know what that did to me? Do you know how that reflected on me? There was a situation that I heard about, and someone was sharing with me that a narcissistic parent, the child had had enough, and they were like, just get out. I don't want you here. I don't want to talk to you. And after the parent hurt them and not physically, but emotionally hurt them, and over a period of time, and they just kind of got to the point where they were like, I can't do this anymore. And that parent called the other parent, they were separated, called the other parent and said, not that the child was in major distress, said, do you have any idea how that made me feel? Do you have any idea how that looked? Blaming the other parent and blaming the child, not that what they had just done, right? So there's a good example of the boundaries and lacking the boundaries and making it about themselves and making that child and the other parent feel guilty for setting those boundaries. And here's a big one. Love, a pattern. So love was given or withheld based on your compliance. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and use an example of one of my clients and how it impacted that client. It's huge. Trauma bonding, right? So if any of these resonate with you, there's a pretty good chance you were raised by a narcissistic parent, and it's natural to feel confused or even guilty for questioning a parent's behavior, because society tells us that that's our parent and we should respect them and we should listen to them. And so if that's the way you were treated and you were raised with guilt, it's natural for anyone to feel confused or guilty about questioning a parent's behavior. But if you're in a culture too where family loyalty is deeply valued, it's going to be even more prevalent. But if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, it's going to be extremely prevalent. But so it's natural to feel that way, but it's also okay to question what hurts you. It's okay to say, wait a minute, that's not cool. But if you're not raised that way, then you think that it's bad. So a client that I had, I'm just going to share a story. A client that I had, their mother was the life of the party. Everyone adored her. She was the fun parent, have all the kids over and everything, so that because she got that adoration and praise. But at home, this client, nothing they did was ever enough. After the friends left, the client would be told, you embarrassed me when you were laughing like that. You made me look really bad to your friends when you didn't do whatever. And it was just this constant criticism. And my client became a perfectionist, always chasing their mother's approval. When they started to come to see me, it was because they were realizing, they saw it happening with their children then, so the grandmother, their mother doing it to their children. And I guess as a parent, it was like, nope, right? And so they realized that they lost touch with who they really were too. And so they came to see me, but, they had no idea that was narcissism. I think there might have been a little bit of borderline stuff going on too, but I'm not diagnosing. But there is signs and symptoms of it. But when I read the client's intake form, right away I was like, whoa, they have a narcissistic parent. And there was only a few things that were said in it. And so when I saw the client for the first time and I said, this is what I see in your intake form, they were like, how did you get that out of a few things? It was like neon lights, right? But for that client who grew up in that, they were just starting to realize it. They didn't, it was huge, but they didn't even know that was a thing. So, and that client's story echoes what I hear often in therapy with adult children of narcissistic parents. The scars are invisible, but they're so real. Once we started diving in with that client and any client that I have with narcissistic parent or parents, sometimes it's both. It's, when we start to unpack it, they're just like, what has happened? And there's usually a pattern, right? It's usually, they all have similarities. So what does it look like to be an adult child of a narcissistic parent? You struggle with self-worth. You have difficulty setting boundaries. You have a fear of abandonment or rejection. People pleasing, huge. Or you have a pattern of attracting narcissists into your relationships. Narcissists love people pleasers, and they love people who are over functioning. And so if that is what's created, and also the brain gravitates towards what it knows, and that's what it knows, you will often find yourself in narcissistic romantic relationships or friendships as well. And I get asked that all the time. Why do I keep attracting these people? And it's not just narcissistic, right? Anything that we often gravitate towards what we know. And I get asked that all the time. Why do I always gravitate towards the same types of people? That's a reason why. There was also a Montreal-based study that found that adults raised by narcissistic parents are nearly twice as likely to report complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, compared to those without those types of backgrounds. So nearly twice as likely to report complex PTSD. Complex PTSD is different than PTSD in that it has, I'm not going to go totally into it, but you can look it up, but some different criteria and multiple traumas, like it's consistent over childhood. So it changes a lot of the development. And because of that, relationships can feel like minefields, all relationships, not just the one with the parent. And they don't trust their own judgment. It can be very challenging to trust your own judgment because your judgment was always wrong, or your judgment was your parents. Narcissistic abuse in the parent-child dynamic is often subtle. Usually it's more subtle with covert narcissists, victim narcissists, as opposed to overt narcissists, because it can be more raging and like elevated, more out there, but it can be very subtle. All these little messages, the guilt, but the impact that it has is profound. And again, in a previous podcast, I talked about narcissistic abuse and how, the gaslighting and the second guessing and always apologizing. Think of that throughout your whole childhood and the ramifications that it can have. It can look like a parent who demands unwavering admiration and whose love feels conditional. So what I see most often is the trauma bonding. So it is doled out. You like the love bombing, right? You are praised. The love is like just, you're saturated with it. Sometimes it's just showing the affection. It's not that grandiose, but it can be in response to compliance, obedience, your achievement. And then when you're not those things, it's totally withdrawn as punishment. So whether it's like just talking about your needs, or you're not being compliant or obedient, or you're not living up to their expectations, then that love is withdrawn. And the other thing that can happen, like I said, in the public and private, the child might be praised in public, but then they're belittled behind closed doors. The other thing is that they're expected to shoulder their parents' emotional burdens. So it's not just about, I'm sorry, honey, I'm just feeling overwhelmed right now. Mom's just a little emotional right now. No, they're shouldering it. They're either their confidant or they're blamed for it. It's because of them that I'm feeling this way, or because of you that I'm feeling this way. The criticism can be constant. So this is the narcissistic abuse that is happening, right? So the criticism can be constant, masked as motivation. How many times have you heard we got to break them down to build them up, right? We hear that a lot in sports, more old school sports. That's not what happens. We don't break people down to build them up. That's abusive. You don't usually build them up. You create a narrative that is self-deprecating. But the parents use this criticism and they mask it as motivation. I'm saying this for your own good. You're not going to reach your potential if I don't tell you every time you're doing stuff wrong. You're going to be a better person if you understand how you affect people, right? That's not true. Okay, that is true. You will become a better person, or you will become, if you understand how you're impacting other people, but not the way that the narcissistic parent is doing it. The other thing, as I said, boundaries are rarely respected. Boundaries don't exist with people with narcissism. And so over time, the child's self-worth and self-esteem, their sense of self erodes. They don't have a sense of self anymore. And their compass begins to point towards just pleasing that parent. So they don't even think about themselves anymore. That compass goes from any kind of self-reflection or sense of self right to how can I please the parent? Or what I've heard a lot too is how can I bring it down, that walking on eggshells, right? How can one of my clients I'd mentioned before, but the parent would use fear if there wasn't compliance. And so and like threaten danger and death and not, do things that would cause death. And so that client was constantly trying to make sure that siblings were compliant, they were compliant, so that the parent didn't escalate. And so if somebody grows up with trying to do that and making sure that they're pleasing their parent all the time and thinking that, their behavior influences somebody else's behavior and emotions, they're pleasing the parents, and what happens? Then they please the partner, and then they please the boss, and then they please the friends, and then they please the children, and they become their friend because they don't want them not to like them, or, so it becomes this chronic state of people pleasing. The cycle of narcissism. It doesn't mean that partners and stuff are narcissistic necessarily, but it means that that cycle continues because they don't value themselves. So this environment, I'm going to talk a little bit about trauma bonding before. I talked about it in the other narcissistic or episode on narcissism, but this environment leads to trauma bonding. And trauma bonding is a powerful and deeply confusing attachment that forms between the child and the narcissistic parent. So I always describe it, and I described it before as the way I describe it to my clients is like a slot machine, right? People don't sit at a slot machine because they're winning all day. They sit at a slot machine because of the chance of winning. They sit at a slot machine because they lose for a while and they win, and it motivates them to keep going. And that is what trauma bonding is. So the doling out of affection and love and the withdrawal. A little bit of kindness, one little bit of praise. If a narcissistic parent says to them, "You did a good job," it's like, whoa. Right? And so then they start trying to please that parent again, and then it's withdrawn as quickly as it's given. And so then they just wait for it to happen again, the love and affection. That is, they stay in that cycle. And the sad thing is, it's the love and the cruelty are so intertwined with that. Moments of affection or approval are unpredictable rewards. So they just keep waiting for it. When they get it, it's that dopamine rush. That's what trauma bonding is. It keeps the child emotionally tethered to the parent, even into adulthood. And the child learns to, like I said, walk on eggshells, internalizing blame and responsibility for the parent's moods. Even as adults, they might feel compelled to return to scraps of kindness. It's funny because I hear this on social media all the time, relationship talk and everything. It's like, don't settle for the bare minimum, right? What he just did was the bare minimum. To an adult who was raised by a narcissist, the bare minimum is what keeps them. So they will take scraps of kindness. They will take, a little bit of praise. They will take, "You just validated me." What? Right? And so even with the parent, that they'll take scraps of kindness and it tethers them into relationships. As adults, they mistrust their instincts and they struggle to break free of those patterns of self-doubt. So, like I've said in other podcasts, I know it sounds like doom and gloom. I'm going to give you light at the end of the tunnel as well. But this is what narcissistic parenting does. And this is what I see in my office more so in the last couple of years than I have in other years. And we talk about that all the time, how narcissism narcissism, the word itself has become more prevalent. And I think that it is used in times it's not really narcissism, but also we're seeing more of it as well. And I think that because it's talked about more, we are seeing more adults coming forward and recognizing like, holy cow, like that I was raised by a narcissist. So let's just talk a little bit about other relationships, how you navigate other relationships now. And so like love and friendship. Adult children of narcissistic parents will often attract emotionally unavailable partners or recreate family chaos. And I often get, why? Why would they want to keep doing that? Why would they recreate that family chaos? Because chaos is what they know. Chaos feels like home. And one thing that I talk to with clients, and not just about this, but also, when you experience mental health issues and you start to feel better, and then all of a sudden your brain starts creating all these scenarios and creating the anxiety, and they say like, why am I doing that? The reason that we create the chaos is because that is what's familiar to your brain. And our brains want what's familiar. Your brain is designed to protect you. And even though it's chaos and it's horrible, that's what it knows. And it's been protecting you or trying to protect you your whole life. So then your brain recreates this. It looks for people that treat you the same way as the parent did, so that I know how to manage this. I don't know how to manage or deal with someone who's good to me. What? And you sabotage or you recreate this chaos. So that when you're asking yourself, why am I continuing this? Why am I picking people? That question I had just said, when people say to me, why do I keep getting narcissistic partners, or why do I keep finding people like this? That's why. Your brain is looking to what it knows. The healing, though, that can happen from that will rewire your radar. You do begin to crave calm, not drama. You learn to spot red flags and honor the green ones. It takes time and it takes some strategies that we're going to talk about, but healing can rewire it. Even if you were raised by narcissistic parents, even if you're 50 years old and you're just realizing it, healing can rewire it, and you can crave the calm and not look for the drama, not look for the chaos. And a client did recently ask, how do I stop attracting narcissists? So not why. I told them why, and then, okay, I know why. How do I stop attracting narcissists? And what I told them was, you stop abandoning yourself. And when you show up for your own needs, when you see those red flags and you don't tolerate them, you stop tolerating people who don't show up for your needs. You stop attracting narcissists, because narcissists look for people who are over-functioning and people-pleasing. They look for people who put aside their own needs. And so if you stop doing that, you're not going to attract them, because they're not going to gravitate towards you. Sounds so simple. Not so simple, but it does. But that is true, right? But you have to do the work. You're not just going to say, oh, that's right, Christine, that's right. Okay, so I'm going to just start putting my own needs out. If you've been raised by a narcissistic parent, it takes some time and it takes some therapy, but it can happen. So just a little bit about the science, about it, trauma and attachment in the adult brain, because my listeners know that I like to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's important. I think that I say all the time, knowledge is power, right? And I think if you understand what's happening in your brain, when I explain that to clients, the light bulb moments that come up, it's like, oh, right? Why do these childhood wounds linger? Narcissistic parents or narcissistic parenting disrupts healthy attachment. In the podcast that I did on the messages that we receive before the age of 8, right? Those formative years when your brain is at highly plastic, it's at its highest plasticity. Those messages get embedded in your brain. Verbal and nonverbal messages. Trauma rewires your brain. It rewires your brain, but in those formative years, it changes the development of your brain. And narcissistic parenting is chronic trauma. And so in those formative years, that is when we develop our core belief. We form attachments or our attachment styles. So your core belief, how you see yourself, others, and your world. It's the attachment styles will dictate how we relate to others, any relationships that we have. So narcissistic parenting disrupts healthy attachment. The healthy attachment is a bond that teaches us how to be safe, loved, and worthy. So it disrupts that. So when that bond is conditional or absent, the brain adapts to that, right? The brain goes to what it knows to be familiar, and that it's creating that familiarity. So the brain adapts to the unhealthy attachment, and then that's what it knows to be true and real. And survivors of narcissistic parenting or narcissistic abuse, they develop a hypervigilance, that walking on eggshells, always trying to make sure that everybody is taken care of and pleased and calm. That becomes their norm. And perfectionism. They can't criticize me if I'm perfect, right? But that perfectionism of never making a mistake because of the expectations as well. They also develop an emotional numbness. So that's the change in development of the brain, right? Those messages, those narcissistic messages, actually, that becomes normal. The brain adapts and it becomes normal. And trauma isn't, and like I said, this is trauma, right? Narcissistic abuse is trauma. And trauma isn't just about what happens to us. It's what's happening inside us as well. It's those like internal dialogue, that inner critic that comes out. Chronic stress that comes with this abuse can change how we regulate ourselves, how we regulate our emotions, how we form relationships, just how we respond to everyday challenges. That chronic stress can change all of that. When we heal, it means that we are retraining our nervous system. We're going to realign our nervous system. That entails challenging those old beliefs. So you can understand that, I always say I'm not like pushing therapy because I'm a therapist, but can you do it reading books and supports? Absolutely. It's just that in therapy, we're really going to challenge those beliefs that the parent instilled in you. We're going to challenge that inner dialogue. We're going to challenge the validity of what the parent said to you so that we can heal your nervous system. We can retrain it to not be on alert all the time. And we can retrain those thoughts so that your needs are put first. And so that all those messages that were ingrained in you aren't your narrative anymore. If you are interested in, deepening that understanding, I often talk about, the body keeps a score. The book, The Body Keeps a Score, by, totally going to butcher this name, Bessel van der Kolk. And it's a foundational resource on trauma's imprint. I do refer to it a lot because your body does keep the score. So I just want to, before I go into some strategies and stuff, I want to talk about, I had mentioned earlier in the podcast about a client that the trauma bonding and they just shared this with me, okay. They just shared this with me, and this client's parent would withhold affection, would go cold if there was any kind of non-compliance or anything like that, really, to the point where this client would use self-harm because they had to feel something, right? Would ask to be punished because it was something, would want their parent to yell at them because it was something, participated in activities growing up, sport activities that would, like play positions in sports where there would be contact or hit with a ball or something, or loved, volleyball, diving for the ball because there was impact and that kind of thing. Because the affection, it wasn't even that the affection was withdrawn, but anytime there was, misbehave or got in trouble, it was cold, stonewalling. That is gaslighting, right? And clients often ask me, okay, but what exactly is gaslighting? That is gaslighting. Gaslighting isn't just about, no, I told you that. No, that you said that, which is gaslighting. And a couple of clients this past week actually were like, oh, that's exactly what my parent does. Just call up and say, okay, well, this is happening. And it's like, did I say that? Yeah, you said it. No, I didn't. And then you start second guessing it. Withholding that affection, being cold, silent, stonewalling, that is gaslighting. So gaslighting, like I've said before, is any time that the other person makes you feel like you're questioning your sanity. When you're like, did I say that? Maybe I didn't. Or did I make that person angry? Oh no, they look mad. That where you're questioning yourself. Was I exaggerating? Did that really happen? Kind of thing. So it's not all bleak. Okay. I did say that we can change it, and awareness, which is why I'm doing these podcasts, is to help people with awareness. And because I have so many people that have no idea what being raised with guilt or narcissistic parenting is, because it's their norm. I want people to learn about it so that you can get the help for it. And awareness is that first step to healing. It's the first step to breaking the cycle, and you can break the cycle so that you don't continue the cycle with your own children, but also just that cycle of self-deprecation and all that we've talked about, walking on eggshells and getting into other abusive relationships, all of it, right? So let's talk tools. Healing isn't just about changing your past. Okay. I often get, okay, but you can't change your past. And I'm not digging into my childhood because it is what it is. You can't change it. It's not about that. The reason we go into childhood, the reason that I dig in there is because it's about changing your relationship with your past, not changing the past. That's impossible. So my 5 top strategies to help you reclaim your peace. The first one, and I use this all the time, so you've probably heard me say it a few times, but name the experience, acknowledge it, name it the way it is. Putting words to your upbringing, right? I was raised by a narcissistic parent. Just say it. We often say, oh yeah, my parent was kind of tough on me. Well, yeah, there was that. No, I was raised by a narcissistic parent. Name it. Because we're so used to, yeah, but I made them feel that way. But no, they were narcissistic. So name it. It's powerful to be able to say that. And it validates your experience. It wasn't your fault. I was raised by a narcissistic parent. It helps you understand your responses. I was raised by a narcissistic parent, and that's why I feel this way. I said the other day, and I've said before in videos, but the best part of my job is when people have their light bulb moments. When people are like, yeah, like, I'm not a bad person. I didn't do that. So saying I was raised by a narcissistic parent, when I said that to a client the other day, you were raised by a narcissistic parent. And again, I'm not diagnosing them with NPD, but that parent, the way they, raised you, that is narcissistic. It was like, I have men, well, the other day, it was a male client, tears welled up in their eyes. I have women and men start to cry because we just named it and we didn't name them. It's not their fault. So name it. Take your power back. Understand. And that was part of it too. They started to understand why they were the way they were. That they're not flawed and they're not horrible people. The next thing strategy 2 that I want you to try is to set boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls. I found a quote a little while ago, and it's, boundaries are not walls. They're doors that you control the lock for, right? So you can open it and you can close it. Boundaries are, if this is what you're going to do, this is what I'm going to do. So they're guidelines to self-respect. They're guidelines to help you maintain your mental health. It might be limiting contact. It's okay to limit contact with a parent. If they're abusive, it's okay to limit contact. It's okay to go no contact. We often say that we can't do that because they're our parent, right? No, it's abusive. It's okay. It's okay to say no. It's okay to have contact with that parent, but state what topics are off limits. It's okay to say, which might be some limiting contact, but, yep, we can come over to see you on Saturday. And if the parent says, well, you keep my grandchildren away from me, I never get, I guess I'll take what I can get, right? I hear that often when parents say, well, I guess I'll take what I can get. Or I'm sorry I was such a bad parent to you that you don't want your kids to see me. That's the guilt. That's the narcissistic parent. Set the boundary. Don't go into that, well, okay, then we'll do Sunday too. No, set that boundary. Seek support. So you can connect with others who get it, right? It can be a support group. It can be other people. It could be friends that you have that were also raised by narcissistic parents. So maybe that's, what you want to do. It can be books, right? You can read about it. It can be therapy. Again, I think that is important, but I don't force people into it, because even with friends that have been, there's value in it, absolutely, but because they get it if they've been through it as well, but they're emotionally invested in their own abuse. A therapist is not emotionally invested. We don't get our emotional needs met through you, right? So we may have a helicopter view to help you navigate it a little bit more, but any community that heals the isolation that you feel. There are organizations like the Canadian Mental Health Association, different organizations that you can research online as well that might have different groups or information for you. The fourth one I want you to do is reparent yourself. A lot of people misunderstand what that means, right? Reparenting yourself means learn to give yourself the love and validation. Give yourself the compassion that you didn't receive. Change that inner critic to an inner coach. It means self-care. It means positive self-talk. Again, I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm talking about, because some people think positive self-talk might be, okay, well, be grateful that they did get you into hockey and be grateful, look at on the bright side of things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about building yourself up. I'm talking about saying things like, that was really hard, but I did it. 4 people just told me today that I'm a really genuine person, right? Different things or one person told me, talk to yourself the way you would talk to somebody that you love, maybe your child, or your partner. Another thing to help reparent yourself is to remember your intrinsic worth, because your parents probably put a lot of extrinsic worth. So a lot of achievements and monetary things and image and that kind of stuff. Really dig into your intrinsic worth as well. And the fifth one of my top 5 is practice self-compassion. So there's positive self-talk, but practice that self-compassion. You are not the criticism that you received. Let that sit for a second, because we start to identify with it. You are not the criticism that you received. And mindfulness and self-compassion, different exercises that you do can calm it. It can help quiet that inner critic, because like I've said before with narcissistic abuse, the narcissist's narrative becomes our narrative, right? So I shouldn't have done that. That caused them to behave that way. So self-compassion, being mindful in the moment, being present in the moment and what's going on around you in that moment can quiet your inner critic. And there are other apps that you can use too. There's Mindshift, which is developed in Canada. There's also Calm. They're tools that you can use for mindfulness to help shift that state and bring it down. Also, like I said, with the support, if you are comfortable working with a therapist, it can just untangle those old patterns. It can build a new narrative, different strategies that you can do. And just remember that progress isn't linear, right? I had a client say that to me the other day. I think that people think that, when you're healing and your progress, it's just like, It's not. You're going to have good days in this journey of healing, and you're going to have bad days. And that's okay. That's part of the journey. So give yourself some grace with that. And like I said, healing is not linear. I often say that healing in mental health is like a child with a marker, right? People think that once I'm starting to feel better, it's like I'm going along. It's not. It's like a child with a marker. But I also say it's like you're driving a car, riding off into the sunset, right? And healing from narcissistic abuse, whether it's relational, like romantic relation or narcissistic parenting, we want it to be smooth. It's not. If you're driving, your car of healing, sometimes you're going to hit the gravel a little bit and you have to bring it back in. That's fine. Sometimes you're going to end up in the ditch and you may need someone to help you tow you out of that ditch. The important thing is to not stay in the ditch. It's not to hit the gravel and pull over and say, I can't do this. It's to tow yourself out or get someone to tow you out, that support, or hit the gravel, correct, and keep going. That's what's important. A lot of times we say, this is too hard and I'm not going to do this. It is hard. My mom used to say, anything worthwhile is hard. If everything was easy, we wouldn't appreciate it, right? So it is hard. But the outcome afterwards, the empowerment that you get, and the quality of life is so worth it. There is also therapies that you can do, EMDR, that's what I specialize in, with trauma to help navigate it. And there's internal family systems. So it kind of goes all with the family systems and changes your trajectory. There's also somatic work. So like how you're feeling, how all of these things make you feel somatically, like sensations, they can help. And so can journaling, meditation, community support. So we often talk about journal prompts because I like journaling. And so a few prompts to explore. What did I need as a child that I never received? What does safety feel like in my body? Many people don't know what safety feels like, right? So think of a time that you did feel safe. How does that feel in your body? What am I no longer willing to tolerate? And remember, while you're doing these journal prompts and day to day, you're not broken. You're becoming, you're changing. So just a few questions that I had from clients and viewers, listeners, audience. How do I stop feeling responsible for my parents' happiness? So one thing I tell all clients to remember is their emotions are not yours to manage. We cannot make anyone feel a certain way. Our behavior can instill an emotion in somebody. Our behavior, if it's hurtful, yeah, but you are not responsible for your parents' emotions. It's how they perceive the situation that makes them feel or act a certain way. So you're not responsible for it. Healing means separating your identity from their expectations. So that's how you stop feeling responsible for your parents' happiness. You're not responsible for their emotions, and your identity is separate from their expectations. The other question, is it okay to go no contact with a narcissistic parent? And I've already answered that, but it is a deeply personal decision. And I always tell my clients, I will never tell you how to feel or what to do. Sorry. I'll never tell you what to do. I won't tell you how to feel either, but we work on that, but I'll never tell you what to do. It's a personal decision, but you do have the right, and you do have the right to protect your peace. Some find that limited contact or firm boundaries work better, and that's cool. That's fine. But others choose no contact for their well-being. And I've had clients who went no contact with their parent and set those boundaries. And one client, it was like 4 years later, they're allowing that parent to be back in their life with very strict boundaries, because in those 4 years, they really worked on themselves and all that came with that narcissistic abuse. So they worked on those strict boundaries. And now they're allowing the parent in. And when the parent steps over the boundary, they stand up for themselves. And they've had a couple of times where it's been about a month of no contact again. And then the parent's like, okay, and they regroup. So it's almost retraining that parent too. And then the last one, how can I build healthy relationships now? So trust is built over time. And even with some of the healing, you may enter relationships with doubt and worrying about trusting or putting yourself out there. Use facts. You know, I'm big on facts, right? But look at the reality of the current situation. Be mindful in the present. Don't compare this person to what your parent would say or do. Allow this person to show you that you can trust them. But they don't have to jump through hoops, right? That's on you. So that's why I say look at the facts. How, is this normal? They just helped me with this. Is that like huge or is that normal, right? Have they, I will say to a client, have they shown you any reason to not trust them? Well, they didn't do this. Okay, but is that trust or is that your perception? It's my perception, right? So also don't put your parents' behavior onto them or your ex-partner's behavior onto them, because they're a different person. Don't always be looking for, right, them to mess up or for reasons not to trust them. Notice the safe people in your life. Practice vulnerability in small doses. That can be hard, but celebrate your progress no matter how small it is. That's going to help you build healthy relationships. If you have other questions that you want answered, you can reach out to us on social media. You can comment on this podcast. And if you were raised by a narcissistic parent, you've had to be resilient. That strength is a part of you. It's in there. You are not responsible for your parents' happiness. Your needs matter. And healing is possible. And it begins with the compassion and that resilience that is in you. You deserve it. Remember that. Thanks for joining us today on the Mental Playbook with Christine Dalgity. If today's episode resonated with you for yourself personally, or maybe somebody that you know of, please share it with somebody who may benefit from it. I really want to get the awareness out there, and sharing it will help us do that. Also, remember to follow us on Spotify and subscribe to us on YouTube, and take care of you.